Connecting the dots on the news of your week, from a shake-up at one of the Metro's most popular events to a new round of questions about the pace, price and progress of the new-look KCI. From a crackdown in the skies of suburbia to the underbelly of our local political scene. Your week reviewed. Next.
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome everyone, I'm Nick Haynes. There are hundreds of places you can go to find out what's happening in the national news. Over the next 30 minutes, we're on a mission to help you better understand the stories where we live, pouring through the week's most impactful headlines. And some of those stories we just plain thought you need to know about. From 41 Action News, reporter Kat Reed getting up at the crack of dawn to deliver your news from the anchor desk of the Fox 4 Morning News set, Mark Alford. From the pages of the Call newspaper, senior reporter Eric Wesson. And found in a hopefully not too soggy state at the bottom of your driveway, but also on your phone, tablet and laptop, Dave Helling of your Kansas City Star. Now, are you ready to go? Let's start. If you're heading to First Fridays in the Crossroads this weekend, note there will be no street performers, no sidewalk vendors and no food trucks. The popular event has been sharply scaled back following last month's shooting death of 25-year-old Overland Park resident Aaron Langhofer. Despite the changes, Mayor Quinton Lucas says come anyway. He's going to be there. So are members of the Church of the Resurrection, who have promised to come out in large numbers to honor the victim in last month's First Friday event. She attended the church, and her father was a member of the clergy there. But how does scaling back on food trucks and street performers create an aura of safety at this event, Mark?
I think it dramatically takes it back to where it was 20 years ago, when it was an art lovers festival where you could go safely to an art gallery, enjoy the art, local artists. One of my favorite galleries, Blue Gallery, we went by, tried to get in. We were there right before the shooting, and we tried to get in. They closed the doors at 8:30. It's become almost like a New Orleans-style festival, and that's not what it was designed to do. Let's get back to what it should be.
Okay.
I will point out the reason why this decision had to be made is because of the loss of liability insurance for the event, which they're trying to get back for October, and they'll be bringing back the food trucks at a scaled back size. I last night interviewed some artists and gallery owners, including the owner of Blue Gallery, and they were really excited about these changes. And they said that it had turned into something kind of unrecognizable, and this returns it to its roots.
You know, I was there a few months ago, and gallery owners came up to me and said, wow, this has become more of a liability, Dave, than a benefit to us. We're not selling art. People are coming in here, they sometimes vomiting. They just want to use restrooms. They're not purchasing the art, which was the intended purpose at the get-go.
That's correct. On the other hand, in September, we'll have an art fair on the plaza. Which will include hundreds of exhibits, but it is a street fair beyond just coming to look at the art or to buy the art. And that's really why the Crossroads First Friday event expanded so much. People like street fairs and they like good weather in the summer and just milling about. So taking it back to its original roots probably is a good idea for the original people who thought of it, but Kansas Cityans like street fairs, and it may pop up in another place in the weeks and months to come.
And Nick, let me also point out quickly that May through October is when they do this, but in the winter months, this is not something that's out there anyway. So we might be seeing a crowd more similar to those who come out in the winter, I would say.
So, Eric, we've had now 102 murders here in Kansas City so far this year. The changes that are being made are scaling back the First Fridays, 2 city gun ordinances that make it harder for those under 18 to be in a possession of a weapon, and a big boost in the reward for those with a tip leading to an arrest in a homicide case, which went up from $10,000 to $25,000. Is there anything else that I'm missing or anything else proposed?
I don't know of anything else proposed, but there's supposed to be some other things in the pipeline, but it's dealing with the police department. I guess if you go back over the last several years, you had the curfew for the entertainment districts come into play as well, in addition to several task forces violence task force, a mental health task force. So you've had a lot of things address violent crime here in Kansas City, and I don't think any of it has gotten to the root cause of what those things are. And you've got economic development projects that are supposed to create jobs that'll help with the violence, but it's not, evidently not working.
Mark.
There is an element of mental health issues involved in this. There's also an element of illegal guns on the streets that have been stolen, and gang activity. But a big component of this is conflict resolution. I know the city and the police department's working with their new program to get in there and help people to talk to solve their problems rather than shoot it out.
The other thing that a lot of people are talking about broadly in this space, Nick, is the lack of clearance of homicide cases by the Kansas City Police Department, because based on sort of current statistics, it's a coin flip whether you'll ever be arrested for a murder or whether murders will be prosecuted. And so in some parts of the community, there's a sense that carrying a weapon is fine because there's a good chance you might not ever be prosecuted for it. Part of that is because of reluctance of witnesses to talk. Part of it is because of lack of resources at the police department. But you'll see an increasing emphasis in the weeks to come on the idea of raising the clearance rate so that people who do these things actually go to jail for it.
Eric.
But then you have the battle back and forth of who's really at fault. Is it the prosecutor's office that wants slam dunk cases so they send them back to the police department? Is it the fact that you don't have enough jail space in the Jackson County Jail to house people that might have committed a violent crime as well?
We're going to return to that issue a little bit later on the program. I want to move, though, to another part of the city because it's been a long time since we ever mentioned KCI Airport on this program. Now may be the perfect week to do so. Members of the City Council now expressing frustration again over how the project is moving forward. Some are unhappy that Edgemoor still hasn't come up with the final price tag and got it locked down.
They don't seem to quite have the numbers locked down, and we are, 15% into the project.
The fact that we don't have these answers is exceedingly frustrating.
Now, there's also dissatisfaction about who's working on the mammoth construction effort. So far, only 3% of Kansas City residents have been engaged in the nearly 23,000 job hours worked. Is the developer obligated to hire a certain percentage, though, of Kansas City residents, Kent?
Well, it has been an intention expressed. That is not explicitly listed in the development agreement, or pledge, rather. It talks about hiring a certain percentage of city-certified minority and women-owned businesses, which we have many in the area, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be local.
And in addition, they were talking about a final price tag. They don't have to have a final price tag for a year until after the contract was signed. So they don't have to have a final price tag.
But we're closing in on almost 2 years since voters said yes overwhelmingly to the airport. Is it unreasonable to expect to have that final price tag?
No, if I went and bought a new car, I'd want to know what I'm paying and how much is the financing cost, which they hid for a long time, did not include that when they pitched it to voters. I want to know the out-the-door price. Is that unreasonable?
Well, I think...
Okay, but the airlines are paying for it. So the FAA has to do some things and Edgemoor has to do some things. So it's really not at the stage yet of where they would know what the final price is going to be.
And I know this is a concern that some council members raised as they were executing the development agreement, that they wanted the nailed down price, but that passed. And so this timeline, was approved by City Council.
Now, one thing we do know is that the fountain is back, having been removed from earlier design plans. It's now in the center of a retail area in the latest renderings of what this new terminal will look like. Also part of the new design images, an interactive digital display that tells the history of Kansas City. If you haven't been to the airport in a while, what does this currently look like? Is it hard for people to navigate around the construction, or is it pretty much business as usual, Ken?
Well, I think one thing you might be surprised by if you haven't been out there in a while is to see Terminal A gone. I know certainly the first time I saw significant progress there, it took me by surprise. The thing that has changed, there have been some traffic readjustments as construction goes on. Some traffic restricted to just one lane, going to B and C. So you might want to allow some more time for that. But I personally have not driven through that area.
Yeah, I'm also told, and correct me if I'm wrong, as you always will, that they're going to reverse the traffic flow at the airport here soon, so that you don't go past A and then get to B and C. You go to C, past B, and then A is the last thing. So in essence, it'll be the back door. The complaint I'm hearing the most, though, Nick, is there is some concern that Edgemoor, in an effort to hold down the price, is really starting to cut some corners on the design and the finishes and the other things that might be done out at the airport, and that there is an expectation that the terminal will be some grand 21st century model for the world, and that someone needs to tamp down those expectations because Edgemoor is going for the cheapest option.
But we were told during the campaign this was going to be a world-class airport
Right.
for a world-class city.
Exactly. We were told a lot of things during the campaign. It's going to be ended up, I think, like the Sprint Center when they kind of ran out of money in finishing that out, and instead of automatic flush toilets, you got to pull the handle. Not that big a deal, but it's not. It's not first class.
Note to self: check. Yeah. You might have to bring your own toilet paper to the airport before that happens. As a cost-saving move, they are on the move. That's the first of 600 Kansas inmates who are now on their way to a private prison in Arizona. The move was announced several weeks ago by Kansas Governor Laura Kelly. She says it wasn't her preferred option, but that the state had no choice. Overcrowding in the state's correction system has created a safety issue for inmates and staff. So transporting these prisoners on an 18-hour journey more than 1,000 miles away in the Arizona desert is the cheapest solution, Dave?
It's a relatively cheap temporary solution, but the bigger problem is just the bed space in Kansas. The bigger problem, though, is not the expense here, Nick. It's the inability of these inmates to connect with family and friends who want to come visit. Now they're halfway across the country, and there's some promise, well, we'll do, Skype interviews or something. But it isn't the same, and it will cause disruption and unrest both among the inmates and the inmates' families. And I think we need to keep our eye on that.
There's a concern in both states about not wanting to build new prisons because of the cost. There's another solution, of course, is to let out lower-level offenders from prisons, but that is not a political solution for many lawmakers either, Eric?
Yeah, that's not politically correct right now. It sounds good and they talk about it, but they don't make steps toward that direction. But one of the things I thought interesting was Crossroads here in the state of Missouri. It's open. They moved everybody over to Western Missouri. Why didn't they try to use that facility? It's closer to home. You maintain those family and community ties rather than go to Arizona, because remember, several years ago, Missouri sent inmates down to Texas.
Right.
There were lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. And I think it cost the state millions of dollars to settle those lawsuits. So it's never really a good idea to send people out of the state to somewhere else that has different rules and regulations.
I just talked to Frank White a little bit ago, and he's not in the jail business anymore. Sheriff Forte is running the jail. It has improved, Sheriff Forte thinks, significantly since he's been able to handle that. But Frank White said that we do need a new jail. Funding has now been found, and he needs the legislature to approve the owner's representative at their next Monday meeting. So we'll see what happens there. They're going to work on behalf of the county, he says, and this process needs to be done promptly to have a good, safe jail that has enough bed spaces.
Because there is an argument currently that in Kansas City they are letting out offenders because they don't have the space. And that, according to UMKC criminologist Ken Novak, is one of the reasons why the city is facing an uptick in crime. In an op-ed this week in the Kansas City Star, Novak claims Jackson County's jail facilities are smaller than other similarly sized metropolitan areas. There are too few beds for violent offenders, which adds to our violence problem. Why? Well, many of the shootings, he says, are retaliatory. Jail time provides a cooling off period for both the incarcerated and those seeking to cause them harm. Are people with violent charges, though, really being released onto the streets?
Well, the statistics show that 6,000 cases a year in municipal court are assaults or crimes against other people. And folks at Rose Brooks Center, which serves domestic violence victims, they've said that people are being released and re-victimizing the people who have already been hurt. So people who work in this sector say that that's what they're seeing.
Here, by the way, on screen are those figures of jail beds in the state, right here in Kansas City, and compared to some other cities around the nation. Why hasn't that elevated the push in a much more aggressive way for the new jail?
Well, the push has been pretty aggressive. I mean, we've been writing about it for 2 years. It's clear the current jail, and You know, the jail was under federal court supervision because it was too small for a long time. Inmates were being housed in the gym upstairs or in a sort of a common area. I mean, this has been a long-standing problem. The problem as it is in Jackson County is the same as it is in other counties, Nick. It's expensive. It costs a lot of money. It might cost $300 million to build a quality new jail that would expand the number of beds in Jackson County. It's hard to proceed politically. I think we are closer to that now than we were some time ago.
Eric.
And one of the overcrowding issues, again, goes back into prosecuting cases. A lot of guys will say, well, they're going to take their case to trial. So that means that they'll be in there for a year, 18 months before their case actually gets to trial. And that goes back to, is the prosecutor's office or public defender's office overcrowded with cases trying to get them
and the
processed?
answer is the public defender's office is underfunded in Missouri. It's one of the poorest funding offices in the nation. Those lawyers then ask for continuances on behalf of their clients. They stay in jail. There's less space. The prosecutors can't bring cases. The judges don't try cases. It's a very complicated question, but there is no question that Jackson County needs a new jail and needs more space to hold people.
But they have lots of other issues they have to deal with
question.
that are also imminent. This week marked the deadline to file appeals if you're unhappy with how much Jackson County says your house is worth. In fact, it was the extended deadline that was supposed to give people more time to get their affairs in order. While the numbers are still being counted, we know at least 15,000 people filed formal appeals. That's on top of the 21,000 people who asked for informal reviews earlier this summer. Legal aid attorney Michael Duffy says he's experiencing firsthand homeowner frustration, confusion, and panic.
We have seen come into our office people who have gotten notification of increases of 50%, 100%, 200%, 500%, 1,000%. These are not just going to be hardships on these homeowners. This is going to force them out of their homes. And this is happening in huge numbers.
I really don't like on this program to keep talking about the same thing over and over again. So let me ask, what happens now, Kat?
So they're still working their way through all of these appeals. This is just a huge workload. In fact, Jackson County has brought in outside help to try and get through these. Once homeowners get their appeals back, they then have the option of going to the State Tax Commission, and they have within 30 days of getting their appeal back to do that. So that would be the next step. It's not going to be, wrapped up as quickly as many property owners would hope.
Mark.
There's no question, though, that something needed to be done. It's been put off for too long, that homes are undervalued. The state's saying, hey, you've got to get the true market value. I've got a friend who's got a house he just sold on State Line, all right? It appraised out at $290,000 on the Missouri side, Jackson County. The taxes were $47,000, just got doubled to about $83,000, but still way under the value. That's not right.
There is a call now for obviously the Missouri legislature to get involved in this. Starting next week, there is a special session of the legislature that's going to look at the used car sales tax issue, which affects about 3,000 people. This affects tens of thousands of people. Could this be added to that special session?
Well, the governor can add whatever he wants. He has to notify the legislature once it gathered, but I don't think they're going to talk about property taxes at all, at least in this year. They may take it up next year, and we've urged them on the editorial board to do so because of the snafus in Jackson County, but also because Nick, and I think Mark is right on this, it's a very complicated thing to fix because if you roll back property values for one person, someone else gets theirs rolled up. I mean, it's so finding a way to put in circuit breakers, to do an honest appraisal is a very, very difficult challenge. And the legislature, we think, may need to step in to set a broad parameter so they do it more often and put in some kind of circuit breaker.
And keep in mind, Dave, this is not your final tax bill.
Correct.
This is an assessment. From that assessment, it goes to different municipalities on what the levy will be, the mill levy on what you will pay, and then you have another chance to appeal.
Can I just say very quickly, I always call it reappraisal, not reassessment, because I think assessment confuses people.
Right.
It's just appraising your property. But the city has to set its mill levy by October 1. They're not going to have final values, or at least an estimate of final values, until about 10 days before that vote is taken. This has really been a problem.
Regardless of how it is defined and what word you use, there is a lot of panic, though, among homeowners.
Yeah, there's a lot of panic, and Mark is right. The city, Kansas City, other municipalities, they can say, well, let's reduce our levy. But there is a lot of panic throughout the community.
On the political scene this week, new Kansas Congresswoman Sharice Davids, who has been in office now for 8 months, will she make it to a second term when she's up for re-election next year? This week, the Kansas Democrat draws a second opponent. Weeks ago, the former head of the National Down Syndrome Society announces she's challenging Davids. Now it's a vice president of Cerner. Amanda Adkins is the former executive director of the Kansas GOP, who managed the campaign of Sam Brownback when he served in the Senate. I see a lot of people trying to downplay her candidacy because of a connection with Brownback. But could those connections help her?
Well, I think that she is distancing herself already from the Brownback connection. If you look at, she's been asked about that, and she said, well, I've worked with a lot of people in my 20 years in politics. So she's not necessarily directly tying herself. So I think she is trying to be seen with someone with broader appeal, for sure.
Dave.
Yeah, I think actually, I talked to some Republicans yesterday. They're pretty impressed with Amanda Adkins. I've got to learn how to say that better. And think she will be a formidable opponent if she is the nominee. So it's going to be a very interesting primary on the 3rd District side. And other people may still get in. There are rumors that other folks may be interested in challenging Sharice Davids because, Nick, this is an iron rule of politics. A House member is most vulnerable in the first election after he or she goes to Washington. So if you're going to get Sharice Davids and you're the Republicans, this is the cycle to do it. If she's reelected, it's going to be more and more difficult going forward.
That's not the only big Kansas political development this week. Kansas State Treasurer Jake LaTurner departs the campaign to fill Pat Roberts' shoes in the United States Senate. He makes it official and announces he's challenging Kansas 2nd District Congressman Steve Watkins from Topeka. Meanwhile, this weekend, Kansas 3rd District Congressman Roger Marshall is expected to announce he wants to be the next United States Senator from Kansas. Which is the biggest story, Dave?
Well, I think the Senate race is an important story, and Roger Marshall should be discounted only at your peril. Everybody thinks, nah, Kobach or somebody else, Susan Wagle. But the fact is that Kansas has a long history of electing the 1st District congressman to the Senate. Bob Dole was a 1st District congressman. Pat Roberts was the 1st District congressman.
Moran.
Jerry Moran was the 1st District congressman. I mean, it happens a lot. Not every time, but it happens a lot. And so Roger Marshall is not a favorite, but he's certainly in the top tier of candidates.
Now, when you put a program together like this each week, you can't get to everything. What was the big story we missed? We're accustomed to hearing about layoffs at Sprint, but layoffs at what has become the Metro's biggest success story? Cerner announcing this week it's cutting 255 employees. Are those job cuts cancelled out by CarMax, which this week announces 300 new jobs in Olathe? They're opening a new concept called the Customer Experience Center. It's designed to allow people to buy cars totally online while never setting foot on the dealership floor. Could this be coming to your city, Prairie Village, slapping people with $500 fines and up to a month of jail for misusing drones? They're alarmed that the popular tech gadget is now destroying privacy as they hover over swimming pools and over people's homes. If you're out and about this weekend, you may see people asking for your signature. A new petition drive launched to put Medicaid expansion on the 2020 Missouri ballot. The Royals host their first ever Pride Night, making them the last Major League Baseball team to hold such an event. It coincided with this weekend's Gay Softball World Series that's bringing 15,000 fans to the Metro. And Chiefs Mania ramps up as they kick off the regular season this weekend, and with a new secret weapon, Andy Reid's younger brother, Randy.
It fires me up every year to be able to bring Randy up to training camp. I mean, he's my little brother. I don't get to see him very often. He brings energy to the team. Guys love him, man.
What's up, Sherm? Get some today.
Usual tonight? Yeah.
I brought ribs.
Ooh, man. Let's go.
Let's go.
Push away. We can only have, we're limited to 3.
We only have one goal.
1, 2, 3.
Super Bowl! Super Bowl.
Alrighty, I can't be certain about this, but doesn't Randy bear a striking resemblance to Modern Family actor and Kansas City native Eric Stone Street? Alrighty, I've laid out for you some options, panelists, for the biggest story we missed. Did you pick one of these or something completely different, Mark?
I think the pride at the Royal Stadium, the K, was a big story. We covered it at Fox 4, but it's good to see an inclusion and the Royals kind of embracing what everybody else has done, especially with the big tournament here this week.
So better late than never.
Yeah.
Eric?
The Call newspaper turned 100 years old.
Oh my
today.
God! Congratulations!
Let's see this drop there.
100 years
100 years at the
old.
Call. That's kind of remarkable. in what has happened to newspapers, that you're still going strong. You were a major asset, and we so much appreciate you.
We're an institution in our community.
Dave Helling.
Yeah, can I just say, I have another idea, but the Call is an extraordinarily important newspaper in Kansas City, and we should applaud it. Kansas City needs voices, and it's an historic voice in Kansas City. And it's congratulations to all the folks over there. No, I'm going to promote one of my own stories, which was the resignation over the weekend of Herb Hardwick, who is the chairman of the committee that oversees the East Side sales tax, the 1.8-cent sales tax. I think it's a good thing. There were questions about his potential conflicts of interest. It shows people care about keeping that tax as honest as humanly possible. He did the right thing, and I think the tax is a good thing for Kansas City.
I would say the Medicaid expansion. I think you've seen a lot of Missouri residents feel empowered to take matters into their own hands if their legislators aren't going to do the things that they want. And there is not that much money involved yet, but the money that is involved is from a dark money group that has funded Medicaid expansion efforts in other states that were successful.
What was the story we heard most about from you this week? Well, it was your total skepticism about the Royals building a downtown ballpark just because the team has been sold. You echoed what Mayor Lucas has already claimed. We need a new downtown ballpark like I need a new Maserati. But could that calculation change if that ballpark were to be built on Kansas City's east side, gaining momentum this week? A proposal to put a new ballpark on a perfectly sized parcel of land just west of the 18th and Vine Jazz District, west of the brand new Major League Baseball Urban Youth Academy. Would it be difficult for the mayor to turn that opportunity down when it's been such an underserved area, Mark?
I think not. I just talked to him at the Red Friday celebration at Union Station. He's kind of given up the Maserati talk, and it now says we need to figure out what this deal is going to be like from the new owner. We need a bi-state agreement. We cannot structure it like we have with Jackson County.
So there would be Kansas voters involved too?
Yes.
Yes, and watch for the Dave Helling column in the next couple of days to explain exactly how that's going to
But that
work.
would be a game changer for that area, Eric.
It could be, but you remember now the Royals and the A's and the Chiefs played down there.
Yeah, 22nd Brooklyn.
22nd in
I
Brooklyn.
wasted many hours of my youth in that ballpark.
All right, that is our Week in Review. Our thanks to this week's news reviewers from the Fox 4 Morning News team, Mark Alford, and from the pages of your Kansas City Star, Dave Helling. From 41 Action News, Kat Reed, and the 100th anniversary of Eric Wesson. Yes, and the Call newspaper. I'm Nick Haynes from all of us at KCPT. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.